Welcome back to the channel, and today we're looking at the brand new Giantmouse Ace. I think it's Bleecker. It's a nice Gents Carry, very slim and sleek profile. Nice size, coming in at 7.4 inches long. It's got a 3.25 inch trailing point blade of CPM MagnaCut steel. You have a very pokey tip there, great for piercing task. Blade has a nice vertical satin finish on it. Beautiful crowning on the spine and very well placed fine cut jimping in the saber grip. This one has a blade hole for deployment. We'll talk about that later. And the first thing I noticed right whenever I open this up is the sharpening choil. Look how you can already see how bad it's already starting to flare at the heel of the blade right there. It's widening up. If I don't fix that myself, it's going to get wider and wider, and I'm going to start hitting the plunge right here with my stones, and it could possibly mess my stones up. So I hate seeing that. I just don't get it. I don't know why companies do that. It just doesn't, I don't know. I know they hear a lot of us talking about it, so especially those who sharpen their own knives a lot. You know what I mean. Whenever you try to sharpen that, not only is it going to look hideous, it's going to get harder and harder to get that portion sharp if you don't open that up a little bit. See, can I? Oh, wow. So it's going to be very difficult because they put a stop pin for the close position. Hopefully you can see that. And it's literally right behind that edge. So I can do it. I'm just going to put a line right there where it's at and then start from the actual edge and then work my way back this way to cut it in. The trick that I know there is to put a zip tie past the point that you don't want to go so you don't wreck the edge. And then I did a short on that if you want to check that out. Now, because this is a trailing point, you have pretty much all belly on this blade. Not something I usually go for, because I tend to like more versatile blades that I can use the tip. Now, I can use this tip if I want, but I'm going to have to almost be at a 90-degree angle to use it. It makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot easier just to use that belly if you want to do a pull-through cut like that. Besides doing drag cuts with the tip, the only other thing that you might struggle with is if you're making a long cut, say through a big piece of cardboard, your natural tendency is to twist the wrist, and being that you have pretty much all belly, you could possibly slide out of the material you're cutting. You know, not that big of a deal, but it's just aggravating. Another thing that I noticed that I could tell, this was a flat grind, so you have a very sharp grind height. And back here where it's the thinnest, because of how high the grind is here, it's still at like 21 thousandths, which isn't terrible. But as I was measuring it, I mean, just literally not even an eighth up the blade, it jumps to like 36 right here and like 46 up here. So it's going to get thick rather quick with each sharpening. So that's just something to note. Now, if you don't sharpen your knives a whole lot, then it's not going to be a big deal. MagnaCut usually holds a solid edge. So is it a deal breaker? That's just going to depend on you and your mileage on sharpening a knife. But as long as this edge is nice and sharp, it should still slice really, really well. Let's find out. The knife came with the okay edge out of the box. It's not the sharpest I've ever gotten, but it does feel like it has some bite to it. And one thing that I've learned to do whenever I'm cutting stuff like this with something with a good bit of belly is just to shorten the stride up through whatever I'm cutting. So for the most part, I had no problems. I mean, I'm not cutting super long pieces here. That's usually the only time you'll really, find yourself sliding out of the material just because of that belly. I mean, but the way it is, it's fine. And it has a sharp enough edge where it's slicing fairly well. Now, this is definitely not something I'd want to do with a knife this thin in the handle and narrow. You could do it. You can make some fine curls, but whenever I really started bearing down, it wasn't comfortable at all because you really start to feel the top of that pocket clip, and you just start to feel the whole knife because you're having to squeeze it much harder than you would a normal sized knife handle. I mean, it's not like a knock on the knife because this is not really what it's intended for. So, is it a negative? I don't think so. So this is where I could tell it had some bite to it, but it wasn't the best. And the edge bevel's definitely playing a part here. I don't know exactly what this edge bevel is. I forgot to measure it. But if I had to guess, I would think it's about 26 degrees per side. I'm just taking a wild guess. Just because, I know this one was made in Italy, and I know they like to put those fat edge bevels. Could be wrong. Hopefully I am. But I will say the trailing point makes this a lot easier than, say, a warranty or a sheep's foot, because you have that belly that you can use for push cuts, slicing motion cuts, sawing motion cuts. You know, the belly is good for that. And that Vox jimping on the spine is perfect for the index finger cut. As you can see, I do a lot of this cutting with that. And that's saying a lot. So it definitely is sharp enough that I can do that. Because if it's not, or let's say if it doesn't have any bite to the edge, then I can't do that index finger, pointer finger cut. But we weren't trying to cut nothing crazy here. I didn't cut a huge piece of rope. I think we cut like 120 pieces just to see if I could do it in a pinch. And yeah, you could definitely do it. And I think it's just those longer periods of cutting is where this one's not going to be a great choice. See how I'm using the belly right behind the tip for the drag cut? That works perfectly fine. And it did that well also. It still feels pretty nice, and I'm sure I could probably strop it up. It may have like a slight burr on some areas or something. I don't know. But it did struggle through that dense cardboard a little bit, not too bad. And the 10-ounce denim, it was doing fairly well. There's a few areas where it didn't feel like it was getting through it. But all in all, I'd say it's good for the type of knife it is. I'd love to hear y'all thoughts. Now, even though I think the edge could have been a little bit sharper out of box, it still performed well. I'm going to put an edge on it right after this video, so I'm not that worried about it, but it's always nice to get a really, really hair-popping sharp edge from factory. Now, let's take a look at the deployment and action of this knife. So you have a thumb hole there, and you don't have a ton of access because of how streamlined this design is. I can easily get my thumb in there to do a slow roll if I want. I can thumb flick it rather easily. To reverse flick, you got to situate your hands properly because you don't have a whole lot to hold on to. I can do it, but I don't always do it reliably. The detent is on the lighter side. I think they did that because you don't have a whole lot of handle to hold on to, and if you have bigger hands, you're likely to have your finger on that lock bar. And if they would have made it strong, it would have pretty much locked you out of your deployment. So I'm okay with it. I always know if I want to add a little bit more tension, I could bend the lock bar over that way. Just a hair, not something I'm advocating, but something I do just if I need a little bit extra detent strength. And I think being that this is more of a Gents Carry design, then it doesn't need to be high-speed, low-drag tactical. Just a slow roll open in an office setting or something, at a wedding. That's where I plan on carrying this knife this weekend. We have a wedding to go to, and I think this one's classy looking, and it's not going to weigh me down, and it's not going to take up a lot of real estate in the pocket. So on the action front, I would say it's good. It's just not great. It is riding on, I think it's riding on bearings. Let me see. Yeah, it's riding on some really, really small bearings in there, and it flips fairly well. Now let's take a look at the handle area. I have the carbon fiber version. They do have an all titanium version. It is more expensive. So you have a standard weave, carbon fiber, kind of like a matte satin finish that's left over the top. It is solid carbon fiber. They did a good job of knocking those edges off at the end of it right here. So there's no sharp spots on the carbon fiber at all. Very, very good job there. The carbon fiber variation has a crowned brass backspacer. I think it contrasts well with the black from the carbon fiber. You have Torx T8 throughout. Love it. The blade centering on mine. Look, it's so hard to tell with this black right here, but it looks like it's perfectly down the middle. We have a tip up, a deep carry wire pocket clip, and it is reversible. Now, one thing that I noticed whenever I was putting it in and out of my jeans is that the contact point right here, the friction area right here, is right in front of that lock bar relief cut right there. So going in the pocket's not a problem. When you go in the pocket, And that's how deep the knife sits, and it does hug the side of the pocket. You don't have a flipper tab or anything, so if you put a phone or something in there, it'll be fine. But whenever I'm coming out, that's why I can't stand that whenever they put it, like put the lock relief on the inside, then you won't have to worry about this. But what happens is the lip of my jeans falls into the lock relief and it catches itself. And many times I've gotten it this far and it didn't come out. I've had another knife where it got this far and it kind of like slipped because of it and did pop out and then hit the pavement. So I hate seeing that. Wish more and more companies would start putting that on the inside. It looks way cleaner and you don't have to worry about that happening. So one positive, if you're a lefty, you don't have to worry about that. Now there's no internal milling. However, this is a solid carbon fiber scale and this is a very slim and sleek knife. So let's see what this one weighs. Coming in at 57.3 grams or 2.021 ounces. That is phenomenal, and that's one of the main reasons why this one's getting carried this weekend at the wedding. The lockup of my knife, I'd say, is around maybe 30% or so. Very tight lockup. Yeah, very tight lockup on mine. And the lock access, that's my next kind of gripe. Because you can see it just barely comes up. You have a little texture there. It's not the easiest to get in there. It's not that bad, but it could have definitely been better. But as long as you get right there where this little spot is and catch that jimp, it's not that bad. I can catch it with the corner of my thumb as well, so call it just a nitpick. Now for some quick size comparisons, it's almost identical in length to both the Giantmouse Ace Nazca and the Giantmouse Ace Iona V2. Next up we have the Ontario Rat 1 and 2, the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3. And lastly, it's just a little bit shorter than the Quiet Carry Waypoint, and it's just a hair longer than the Kaiser Mercury. All right, now for my nitpicks and complaints. First, like I said, I wish we would have had a better sharpening choil that wouldn't be flared out from factory. Of course, I would have liked to see maybe a hollow grind on this so it wouldn't be as thick, and wish it had a little bit better lock access, but that's very, very minor because as long as you get into that little spot, it's not bad. And lastly, deployment could be an issue with somebody with bigger hands or fat sausage fingers. Just because of how slim the knife is, you gotta have something to hold on to before you flick it out. I have no problems. The detent could be a little stronger, but you're definitely teeter-tottering on the strength of that detent because of how slim this is and putting your fingers on that lock bar when you go to deploy it. You don't want to get locked out of that deployment. So, you know, I think it's good enough. I know I can always increase that tension if I ever needed to. But I got to be honest, I was surprised. I didn't think I would enjoy this knife at all. Usually when it comes to these trailing points, I just don't tend to gravitate toward them as much because I like something that's versatile to about everything I do, or if it's not a versatile drop point or sheep's foot or something like that, you know, I like a worn clip. But I enjoyed using this one, and I think just like on the Vosteed Parallel and how thin this one is, and I think for my summertime carry, I really, really enjoy these thinner, lighter weight knives that don't take up much real estate. They're super easy to carry in gym shorts, my lightweight fishing shorts, and being that this one's in CPM Magna Cut, I'm not worried about it rusting. It has a nice satin finish on it, so it would take a lot probably to cause this blade to corrode. Now, the price is kind of hefty, but they're like this on pretty much every one of their models, I think. For this version with the carbon fiber show side scale, comes in at $245, and the all titanium variation comes in at $285. So I'll have to let you be the judge on that. It's definitely a very well made knife. I think it's an attractive looking knife. It carries well. Mine's nice and smooth, and it's a decent slicer, especially, you know, if you consider it as a gents carry knife where you're not going to be hacking at 1-inch sisal rope or something. I think it's going to be perfectly fine for day-to-day EDC tasks. So there you go. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave those down below. I hope everybody's having an absolute amazing day. I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.